Hang on.
Okay, so this is still number 9. We got cut off midstream there. I don't really know. I don't even know what we were talking about. This is number 9 in the body electronics spiritual talk, spiritual discussions. So I think we just wanted to come on, Guy and I, and just do like a completion to this talk. So Guy, would you like to, I think we were somewhere around doing something with a quote from John's books. Is that something?
Yeah, I was reading out some of this. He's sort of focusing on this little page here about bringing to light all the darkness. So there's a sentence here that reads, "One learns truth by studying truth. By so doing, the crystals of darkness dissolve, and all resistances to truth shall arise to be mastered by the intelligence."
Nice. Yeah, and then the screen went dark.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
That brings me, that pops up in my mind to just say something, and just in completion here of this discussion, to talk a little bit about entities. So one of the things that came to me this week, and I wrote about it, I don't know, it was on the Facebook group page or somewhere, I saw how memory, and this is something just to be aware of, how thought forms can seem like they are a memory. And so in body electronics, we break down entities into sort of different categories. There's many different types of categories. And so one of those categories is thought forms as entities. And basically what we mean by that is that we have such unconscious repetition of a thought form, of a pattern that we continually ignore or feed, that it takes on a life of its own. And so it just automatically keeps going. It can be even like a visualization. And then that can actually come up when we're doing the inner work as a memory. So we have to be a little bit, or more than a little bit, we have to be very discerning to know what it is, or if we're just sort of like creating these fantasies within the mental body. That is something that we don't often talk about, because we're always looking for memory to bring that memory up. But we have to be discerning too, to know if we have, if it's more like a self-created thought form that isn't truly a memory. It just didn't actually happen, but it was so fed by our thought forms that it can appear like a memory. So it's something that I've experienced. And at the time I was like, and I remember speaking with Doug about it and asking questions around it in class, where, if something comes up as a memory, is there a possibility that it actually didn't happen? And so there was a lot of that sort of, there's a lot of astral projection in the, with programs and patterns. We can do what we call astral projection, and they can seem like very real experiences, much like a psychedelic experience, except that they aren't real, they're fantasy. And like, they're not true spiritual experiences. You're going off into the astral realm and sort of playing in that sort of what I call, like, we want to look at in dimensional, just to give it a construct. We need constructs in order to understand, and for the intellect to kind of have this feeling of understanding, so that we can move through that process of evolving. So we could say that the astral realm is, which is, sort of around our bodies. The Holy Science is a great book to read by Sri Yukteswar. It's still in publication by Self-Realization Fellowship. You can find it in every metaphysical bookstore. And he sort of lays out the astral body, the causal body, and all of that. And I really like the way he how he did that. And but let's look at it in terms of fantasy. So we can ride that astral wave in our mind, and the construct you could say is at the lower levels of the fourth dimension. So we're just sort of moving out of third dimensional reality, and we're sort of piercing into that lower levels of fourth dimension. Again, just a construct, just a way to look at things. And we do that with our belief that we are entering into spiritual realms, when truly we're just really capped off at a very limited astral plane. And in that astral plane, just like with psychedelics, we can be messed with all kinds of other entities. And most of them are very impish, and they just want to wreak havoc and play with you, and interfere or be disruptive or whatever to your spiritual growth. So that's something to be very aware of when we're looking at that. There's just so many things to discover on this unfoldment into that true spirituality, what John wrote about, that we enter with a pure heart. So shall we, I think, Guy, can you have the last word here? And
Okay, well, I did want to ask a question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Just you talking about thought forms, sometimes on the table, I've had the experience where I've got this really intense word pattern and there's a lot of emotion, but there's no memory. So is that generally a pretty good indication of a thought form?
No, not necessarily. If you have the emotion and you have the word pattern, I would say really keep looking, like intensify the emotion, repeat the word pattern, and continue to look for the memory.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense, because there might still be a memory there.
Absolutely. And there will be, because with every memory, there is emotion.
Okay.
Yeah. So just really, you'll find that. I'm just saying, being a little bit discerning, because it can fool us sometimes, not often. It's usually the memory, it can be memory from the deep unconscious that, we haven't even fathomed before, but it is still a valid memory. It's part of our history. It's part of our own personal Akashic record. So we want that to come forth into our awareness, where we can work with it. Something else just came there. Yeah, I feel like if you, I know. So it was, again, I'm going to quote Doug, and that's Doug Morrison, author of How We Heal, by the way, which is a prerequisite reading to any intensives that I hold, along with some other things. And Doug would often say, when, there'd be a sea of people on the table, and we always had, huge groups in the early days, and, in the 40s usually. So there'd be around 20 some massage tables, and there was a lot of energy and a lot of activity. And he would often call out, don't be a past life tourist. And that's an interesting statement in body electronics. And he talks about that in How We Heal as well, where he says that we can, sometimes things are from past lives and they come up and we aren't aware of them prior. And that's something that you just allow in the process. You don't censor anything. You allow whatever's coming up in that particular time on the table, you welcome it and you work with it. But the past life tourist thing, that really intrigued me. And I feel like another part of it that he would explain in lectures is that every pattern that we're still looking to transmute exists in the here and now, in this awareness of this body. So a lot of people, especially I think maybe a few years, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, I don't know, where people were really intrigued about past life stuff and reincarnation. And so they were really looking for that. And that kind of ties in with what I said earlier about fantasy. So they were kind of looking for all these things. And I know people were looking to be like famous people or whatever was their fantasy. And but I think if we're really honest with ourselves, we will know the difference. That doesn't mean that some of the fantasy doesn't have to be released and transmuted. We recognize it for what it is, which is a counterfeit, and we release it with the same way we release everything else, with the power of encompassment of unconditional love, the infinite love that is within us. And we release it, we let it go. So back to that tourism, that past life tourism, to concentrate our efforts here and just not automatically want to make something fantastical or phenomenal. So that's just something to consider.
Yeah. That's funny. It reminds me of a funny story I heard about, I think it was on the Ricky Gervais podcast, where some people who believed they were famous people in a past life got together and two of them turned up as Napoleon. But there was a story, one of my point holdings, an entity release that I thought might be prescient or kind of important or worth talking about in this discussion, if that's okay.
Sure.
And this was around, I don't know, 2006 or 7. Graham was holding my points in Auckland, and he I think he was on a foot point, and anyway, it doesn't really matter, but I had this feeling on my chest, and the word pattern was I can't breathe, and it got to the point where I could barely even say I can't breathe, and it's this really horrible kind of feeling on my chest. And then just out of the blue, well, after I'd sort of intensified this, Graham said the decree, and you can read about this in book 2, Logic and Sequence. But it's something like, in the name of Jesus Christ and Saint Germain and all of the ascended masters, I hereby command this entity in the body of the person's name, leave now and go directly to the light of God. And I'd never really experienced this before in the point holding table. I'd heard the decree said a few times, but nothing ever happened. But in this point holding, when Graham said it, this incredibly sort of strong energy just left my body. It was a really amazing feeling where I just had all this crazy tingling and energy around my chest, and just felt this pressure just come right off me.
Wonderful.
So that was probably, I've never met an ascended master. Of course, I heard about them back in 17 or 18 and first getting into BE, but that was probably the closest I've ever had to perhaps evidence of, I don't know if that would.
Experiences is everything.
Yeah. But that was just a real eye-opening experience to the sort of the reality of spirituality, I guess, because I came from a pretty sort of standard middle-class scientific reductionist atheist sort of background, Yeah.
And how did you feel after that? Like after the point when you went back into your daily life, how did you feel about it then?
Sorry, I missed part of that. I think the signal was kind of weak.
How did you feel? How did you feel? Was there changes? Did you recognize changes in your awareness, or did you experience something after, like in your daily life?
I think perhaps less tension, but looking back at that period of my life, I was, compared to now, a much more unconscious kind of person. So I probably would not have noticed a lot of the if there'd been many changes, I might not have noticed, but I certainly haven't had any sort of breathing problems or anything like that since then, and I don't think that word pattern's come up. And
Often, one of the things that people say after they've had an entity release on the table or off, that addictive behaviors often fall away.
mm,
Yeah, that's something that's commonly said by people. And even, even cravings for eating or drinking something that isn't going to support the healing crises. Those things kind of drop away. I mean, there's a period of time when I was giving myself an exorcism almost on a daily basis. Especially, and it kind of came in waves where you would come into a new level, and then you become more aware of interferences, and whether they're our own thought forms or whether they're spiritual imps. It's really important to know that we have the ability to say, get lost, and and really to depends on how the circumstance. Of course, sometimes it's not that easy. If they've been an actual attached entity for a long period of time, it could be for many lifetimes even, that there can be an entity attachment from like an actual other soul entity that's attached to your auric field and into your energy stream, and that entity just continuously incarnates with you. That can be a little bit more intense to release, and of course we always do that with love and respect. Where I often will connect with that being and give them like their pre-eviction in a very respectful way, but at the same time it's a done deal. We're going through with this. We're going to release that entity once we've become aware of it. It's our duty to release that entity to the light and love of God. And so
thank you.
yeah, like even with, I know we've talked about this before, but I often see a correlation with parasitical infection on the physical level with that vibration of entity involvement. So I think I wrote something a while back on my website. It's the spirit gut connection. We hear a lot about the I don't know, other people have written about the gut brain connection or something like that. So, but this was kind of taking it a step further. So the spirit gut connection, and how parasitical infections are a physical manifestation of energies that clearly need to be loved and released.
That's interesting. Makes sense though. It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure Doug said in his book that psychologists have found that there's been some sort of scientific studies about entities. I can't remember how he put it, but there was he recommended a book, I think by some psychologist or psychiatrist.
I've been really turned off the whole the word science.
It's become a dogma recently, I think.
Really, it's the last 2.5 years have really shown us how that word has been abused and misused and promoted. What people call science is really anti-science. It's not based in truth. It's not based in fact. It's based in other things. So so that word really doesn't really vibrate with me anymore. I want to just move on from that word and all the ideas that we have around it too. They all had to come to the surface. The our institutions, our universities who, the medical universities that are funded by pharmaceutical companies to make the science, that all had to be exposed, and so it is. So we'll start to reevaluate our languages and become, as we become clearer and clearer in this transformational process we're all going through on Earth right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned sort of addictive substances, and I've always found there's a sort of a beautiful dance here where it's like you should release the addictive substances to do better body electronics, but doing BE will help you to release the substances. So it's like a really, it's a really good kind of mechanism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of like when we upgrade our nutrition, and then we take that step to upgrade our nutrition, and then everything starts to to run better. But it's really in taking that step. And if we're taking the step to do body electronics, and we're it's like the lower law and the higher law, right? So the lower law is the physical law, which is of the lower law to the emotional body, and the emotional body is a lower law to the mental body, and the mental body is a lower law to the spiritual body. And so whenever we can choose to make an effort, to truly make an effort to a worthwhile effort for transmutation, that everything that's beneath it, so if we're transmuting emotion, what's beneath it is going to be transmuted as well. It's like and that can be shown in the emotional body too. For newcomers, our emotional body construct is 49 levels, 7 levels within 7 levels. So within that, so let's say we're at the level of grief. Let's say we're at the level of angry grief. So if we are transmuting that level of anger within the main level of grief, it actually has, when we transmute, when we actually access the infinite love, that power that transmutes, the forgiveness and the true gratitude, those are the 3 powers. When we actually access those and apply them within that emotional transmutation, we transmute everything beneath it, particularly the level we've accessed. So particularly in this case, it would be the level of anger. So we would, at the same time, we would have an effect on everything beneath it, but we would particularly transmute the anger of apathy and the anger within unconsciousness. So that's something to remember, that when we, wherever we're at, that level of transmutation transmutes everything below it, but not above it. And we'll see that, within the regeneration process. So in body electronics, the grief is in pancreas. So the pancreas is, when we transmute anything in grief, we see a regeneration in the pancreas. We also see a regeneration in the spleen, and we'll also see a regeneration in the gonads, ovaries in a female and testes in a male. So we'll see those regenerations, and that within that regeneration, the hormones will actually be revitalized, be able to produce those hormones again. Insulin will be, the insulin resistance will be healed with the release of grief. So that's how the lower law and the higher laws are shown on the physical level. And the higher up you go in the emotional body, the level of anger is in the thyroid, parathyroids. The level of pain is in the pituitary. So if we're, we move up the scale of emotion sequentially. We don't just say, okay, today I'm going to work with, you know, the level of fear, heart, thymus. You know, we don't forefront what we're doing. We take in that ever-present now, we take what our own consciousness gives us to work with. We, you know, we don't judge it. We don't override it by thinking that we could figure out something better to work on, even if it may seem silly or insignificant. We will find out that what does come forth is truly significant and has, that's the perfect timing for that release. I've seen that, you know, countless times. Okay, shall we complete there?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, thank you so much. So this
All right.
number 9 will be in 2 parts. I'll just, when I upload it, I'll just put part 1 and 2 for people who are joining us. And my website is wholehealthcenter.com. There's lots to read there. If you want to join the Facebook group, it's called Body Electronics, the Evolution of Consciousness. And I also have another group page called the Gnostic Way. So any of those, you can feel free to indulge. There's the Logic and Sequence, which is priceless. Series of books are on my website as free PDFs. So yeah, please feel free to download and read them and absorb them. They are very powerful material. So thank you very much, Guy. And
Thank you, Illia.
till next time, number 10.
All right.
Okay, so long.
See you then.